Now, in our work, we've identified 4 important drivers of innovation, as I promised. So let me tell you what those are, and then we'll go into each of them in a little more depth. The first is improved measurement, much more detailed ability to keep track of what's happening with your customers inside your organization, with your products and services, with your suppliers. The second is the ability to do real-time experiments, not just in the laboratory, but throughout your organization, throughout the business, experimenting with your customers, with your employee relationships. We'll describe that some more, too. The third is the ability to share that information more rapidly and efficiently. And the fourth one is the ability to take those innovations and scale them up more quickly, replicate the successful ones throughout the organization. And all of these are done with technology. And they haven't just been sort of 5 or 10 or 20% improvements, but we're talking several orders of magnitude improvements on each of these dimensions. Fundamental revolution that's going on. And what's more, these revolutions are synergistic. They're complementary with one another. That the revolution in one area enhances the power of the next couple of areas. So let me start with the first one and describe a little bit about what's happening with measurement. So historically, whenever measures have improved, that's been one of the most important drivers of progress in science and in our knowledge. A great example of that is this guy here, and Bart's going to get me because I'm going to mispronounce his name, but Anton van Leeuwenhoek, is that pretty close? Yeah, okay. So anyone know who he is? See, he's holding this thing here. This is not an iPod. This is one of the first microscopes. And he developed really the first really effective microscopes that allowed him to peer into a drop of water. And what he saw in that drop of water was little creatures swimming around. He called them animalcules. And no one believed him. He wrote to the Royal Society of London and said, look, there's animals inside this drop of water. And they said, oh, God, this guy's nuts, you know. And they didn't believe him until they sent a team to go visit his laboratory. And he showed them that, indeed, there are creatures inside a drop of water. And he looked inside his own blood, and you could see blood vessels flowing through, corpuscles flowing through his blood vessels. So this, of course, led to a complete revolution in our understanding of biology and ultimately in medicine. Wouldn't have been possible without that better measurement. Today, we're seeing a revolution in our ability to measure things inside of organizations. And again, it's not just in one dimension, but it's in many fine-grained dimensions. Here's a partial list of them. I call it nanodata. But we have, for instance, clickstream data, being able to see each time someone goes on a website and visits, say, a retail website, you can see what they're looking at, what they're reading, whether they buy something, whether they pick something up and then put it back down. It's as if you were able to track someone walking around in a supermarket and see what they looked at and what they considered and what they didn't consider. Retail companies routinely do that at websites. And of course, it's not just retail stores. There's all kinds of different web applications. And I and many of my colleagues have spent a lot of time now mining through gigabytes and terabytes of data, tracking consumer interactions and employee interactions. Mobile phone, we now have very detailed geolocation. Some of you are probably using things like Foursquare, but there are companies, my colleague Sandy Pentland and I have been doing some work looking at traffic flows in cities, and you can do that with mobile phones. Email messages, I have a series of papers where, just as Van Leeuwenhoek looked at the flow of blood through an organism, we can look at the flow of information through email networks inside of organizations. And instead of treating a company as this black box, the way most economists have had to do for years, the way I had to do for years, we can now look inside that black box and see who's talking to whom and who's more productive and whether or not being connected in certain ways makes a difference. And I could go through each of these, but in each case, it's a quantum change in our ability to keep track of and understand and measure what's happening in terms of economic activity within firms and between firms. And it's not just researchers like me. Of course, many companies are doing these kinds of analyses and understanding better what's working on. Now, I'd say by and large, it's a very underexploited resource. It's been someone likened it to what we do with gold. We take a lot of time and effort to find gold, refine it, and bring it to a central location. Then once we've got it, we store it underground, and then we never look at it again. And to some extent, that's what's happening with data, where people spin off a lot of data. It comes out of their operations, their ERP systems, and it's literally stored in data tapes underground in many cases without really being used or exploited effectively. But it's growing very rapidly, doubling every about, 1.2 years or so. Hal Varian did a study and found that there were about 1 exabyte of data available in 2001, and now it's at least 10 times that much. So that's one revolution that we're seeing, and it's changing the way companies are able to make decisions. And here at Microsoft, I think Ron Kahavi at Microsoft Research came up with a good analogy. He compared decision-making with data versus decision-making the traditional way, which is with hippos. You guys know what hippos are? It's a term coined here locally. The traditional way that most organizations make decisions is they go with the highest paid person's opinion in the room. But that's changing. Companies now are able to get the actual data and know what's happening. Instead of having truck routing done by a human expert or a set of algorithms, they now have a set of algorithms that are based on the data. For instance, at UPS, they discovered that in most cities, when you plan out a delivery route, you should never make left turns. So they found that it's more efficient just always turn right. You can think about that a little bit, and you can understand why that might lead to faster deliveries. In wine chemistry, a company called Enologics has figured out how to scan through data and compared it to Robert Parker's wine ratings, and they can now predict with great accuracy what rating a wine is going to get even before the humans look at it. We've done some stuff with Google Insight, a database of what searches are being done. There are about 100 billion searches that are done every year by people. Each time someone does a search on a search engine like Google, they are expressing their interest in a certain topic or area. Well, you can actually, that data is available. You can look at what people are searching for, and you can look at popular culture trends, or you can use it for economic purposes. We went ahead and looked at housing markets. And if you look at the search trends for housing in different geographies, you can predict with great accuracy what housing sales are going to be in the next 3 months or 6 months, and what housing prices are going to be. So we did a very simple little model of this, and I wrote up a paper of this with Lin Wu, one of my PhD students. We're not experts on real estate economics, but we just sort of quickly read the literature and plugged in the Google Trends data. And then we submitted the paper to an NBER conference, and we did something maybe a little foolish. In the paper, we made predictions as to what the housing sales and prices were going to be in the next quarter. And we went to the conference, and the 10 days before we showed up at the conference, the official data came out. And luckily, we got the numbers pretty much right on the nose. We were within 1/10 of a point of what the actual housing sales were. Just by point of comparison, around the same time we made our prediction using Google Trends, National Association of Realtors also made a prediction, and our prediction was 3 times as accurate. Again, not because we had any special expertise in housing economics. It's just because this data are available now that give you insights. You could use it in many other areas if you wanted to predict who's going to win a standards war or what the sales are going to be of different products. So this is some examples. There are many others that one could look at of how data allows you to make better decisions.